prevent a terror attack from ever coming back to the United States as it did now almost 18 years ago.
I want to get to the bigger question. Who thought it was a good idea for the President of the United States? You had an agreement in principle already, your envoy meeting with Taliban leaders in Qatar, fine. Who thought it was a good idea for the President of the United States to meet with Taliban leaders who have the blood of thousands of Americans on their hands just 3 days before 9/11?
You know, we know the history of Camp David. We reflected on that as we were thinking about how to deliver for the American people. And so as we considered the right path forward, your point about an agreement in principle, I think that's true. We weren't complete. There's still lots of implementation issues, lots of technical issues that needed to be worked on, even though we'd been doing this for months. President Trump ultimately made the decision. He said, I want to talk to President Ghani. I want to talk to these Taliban negotiators. I want to look them in the eye. I want to see if we can get to the final outcome that we needed so that we could sign off on that deal. So we found that arrangement acceptable, that the verification was adequate, and we concluded this was a perfectly appropriate place. You know the history of Camp David. Lots of bad folks have come through that place. There's been lots of peace negotiations taking place. It's almost always the case, Chris, that you don't get to negotiate with good guys. The reason you're in negotiations to end wars, to end conflict, to end violence, to reduce risk to the American people is almost always because the person across the table from you isn't exactly the finest.
Well, I understand. I don't want to press the point too much, but you know, Yasser Arafat was there, and obviously he was responsible for the Palestinian Liberation Organization for the death of many people.
Many Americans.
But the Taliban had the death of thousands of Americans, and it's just 3 days before 9/11. No concerns about that? And I guess my question is, you know, I can understand the envoy talking to him. Why does the president have to confer that status on them?
Yeah, President Trump was very clear. He wanted to make sure we got to the right place. He's always been someone, I've observed this now for my entire time working for him as CI director and now as Secretary of State. He's willing to take risks. If he believes he can deliver a good outcome for the American people, he was hopeful that this conversation would lead. I mean, we've been at this now almost 2 decades, Chris, $30 billion a year. And we've got terror risks all across the world, not just in Afghanistan. We've got to make sure we have the forces postured right all across the world. We sometimes singularly focus on Afghanistan because of its deep history and deep connection and what they did on 9/11 that still angers me to this very moment. We've got to make sure we get it right. And our efforts over the last months have been to do that. President Trump has been very clear about our mission set, and I hope we'll get the opportunity to continue to head down that path so that we can get the reduction in violence and we can get the Taliban to make a commitment and then live up to it to break with al-Qaeda, and that we can get them back at the negotiating table with their Afghan brothers and sisters to reduce the level of violence there.
Iran just announced that it is going to use